From Homeless to Millionaire. The story of X. The story of X begins in a small town, far away from the glamour of cities and the noise of wealth. X was born into a modest family, not rich, not poor, just hovering somewhere in between. His father was a factory worker, his mother a homemaker, and the rhythm of their life was simple: work, school, meals, and the occasional holiday gathering that felt like luxury. X was not born with a silver spoon, but he had something far more valuable: dreams. From an early age, he wanted to build something that mattered. As a child, he'd sit on the front porch of their small wooden house, scribbling business ideas in an old, half-torn notebook. Sometimes he dreamed of owning a shop, sometimes of becoming an inventor, sometimes of being a leader. His imagination had no limit. At school, X wasn't the brightest student, but he had a spark. Teachers noticed that when he got interested in something, he would dig deeper than most kids. He once built a makeshift lemonade stand using scraps from the garage and sold drinks to neighbors. The profit was only a few coins, but X didn't care. It was the thrill of creating something out of nothing that excited him. Yet, life wasn't always kind. His parents' marriage was turbulent, arguments echoing through thin walls at night. Money was always a subject of tension. When his father lost his factory job, things began to crumble faster than X could comprehend. Bills piled up, food portions grew smaller, and the electricity sometimes went out because payments were late. But X was still hopeful. One day, he whispered to himself at night, "I'll be successful. I'll give my parents the life they deserve. I'll never be poor again." Little did he know, fate was preparing him for a storm he could never have predicted. Life unraveled piece by piece. His father, unable to find steady work, turned to alcohol as an escape. His mother tried to hold the family together, but the stress of unpaid bills and constant arguments broke her spirit. At 16, X felt the weight of an adult on his shoulders, but he was powerless. When he turned 18, he graduated from high school with mediocre grades. College was out of reach, too expensive. Instead, he took a series of odd jobs: washing dishes at a diner, cleaning cars at a gas station, delivering newspapers at dawn. None of it paid well, but it was enough to buy food for himself and sometimes slip a few bills to his mother. Then came the tragedy that would change everything. His father died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving the family in shock. The little money they had was spent on the funeral. His mother, heartbroken and unable to cope, spiraled into depression. Eventually, she moved in with relatives far away, leaving X alone. He rented a tiny apartment with what little savings he had, but soon the money ran out. Jobs were inconsistent, and landlords didn't wait for rent. Within months, X was evicted. That was the beginning of his homelessness. At first, homelessness felt surreal, like a bad dream he would soon wake up from. He carried his belongings in a single backpack: 2 shirts, a pair of jeans, a worn-out notebook, and a photo of his parents from happier days. Nights were the hardest. He slept on park benches, under bridges, and in abandoned buildings when he could find one. Hunger gnawed at him constantly. He learned which restaurants threw out food at closing time, and he dug through trash bins behind bakeries hoping to find something edible. The shame was unbearable. People passed him by as if he were invisible, or worse, as if he were trash. Children clung to their parents when they saw him, and businessmen avoided eye contact. X, who once dreamed of owning businesses, now couldn't afford a loaf of bread. Rainy nights were the worst. With no shelter, he'd curl up under cardboard, shivering as water seeped through his clothes. His shoes wore out until holes appeared in the soles. He wrapped his feet in plastic bags to keep them dry, but it barely helped. Yet, in those darkest moments, X clung to a small ember of hope. He remembered his childhood dreams, his notebook filled with ideas. He no longer had the notebook, he'd lost it during eviction, but the dreams remained in his heart. I will not die like this. This is not the end. Homelessness introduced X to a hidden world, the underbelly of the city. He met others like him, the old man who had once been a war veteran, the young runaway who had fled an abusive home, the mother with 2 children who slept in a shelter. Each had a story, and most stories ended in despair. One night, huddled around a fire made from burning trash, an older homeless man named Marcus spoke to him. Marcus had been on the streets for 20 years. Kid, you got 2 choices. You let the streets swallow you whole, or you fight every damn day to get out. Most of us give up. Don't be like us. Find your way back. Those words stayed with X. For the first time, he realized that homelessness wasn't just about lacking money. It was about losing hope. If he lost hope, he'd be trapped forever. Still, surviving was a daily battle. Some nights he considered giving up. Some nights hunger was so sharp it felt like knives in his stomach. But each morning he forced himself to rise, to move, to try. The turning point came unexpectedly. One afternoon, after days without proper food, X wandered into a public library just to escape the cold. He hadn't been inside a library in years. The smell of books, the quiet atmosphere, it was like entering another world. He sat down and began reading at random. First magazines, then self-help books, then biographies of successful people. What shocked him were how many millionaires, inventors, and leaders had once been poor, rejected, or even homeless. He read about Abraham Lincoln, who grew up in poverty. He read about Oprah Winfrey, who came from hardship. He discovered stories of entrepreneurs who had failed dozens of times before finding success. And for the first time in years, X felt something ignite inside him. Belief. If they could do it, why couldn't I? He returned to the library every day, devouring books. He learned about personal finance, business, psychology, and motivation. He filled scraps of paper with notes and ideas. Though he had nothing in his pockets, his mind was becoming rich. One quote struck him deeply. Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. X decided then and there, this was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning.
"You're stealing jobs from us," the man snarled. "Why should you get paid while the rest of us starve?" X tried to explain that he wasn't stealing, he was working. But the man didn't listen. He pushed X, knocking him into the snow. For a moment, rage boiled inside him. He wanted to fight back, but then he remembered Marcus's words and his own promise. He wouldn't let the streets drag him down again. So he stood up, brushed the snow off his clothes, and walked away. That night, replaying the scene in his head, he realized something powerful. Success isn't just about making money, it's about controlling yourself. By the end of winter, X had saved nearly $1,000. It was the most money he had ever held in his life. He stared at the envelope of cash with trembling hands. $1,000 wasn't enough to change his life completely, but it was proof of something bigger. That discipline, persistence, and hard work worked. With that money, he made another bold decision. He rented a small, run-down studio apartment. Not much better than his previous room, but this time,
It was his. He no longer had to sleep on benches or in shelters. The day he moved in, he stood in the empty room, arms stretched wide, tears in his eyes. I'm not homeless anymore. This is the first step. That night, lying on the floor of his new apartment with nothing but a blanket, X reflected on his journey. From losing everything, to sleeping under bridges, to clawing his way back with odd jobs, to now having a roof over his head, he realized how far he had come. But he also knew this was just the beginning. He pulled out his notebook and wrote, Step 1, survive. Completed. Step 2, build stability. In progress. Step 3, grow into something bigger. Coming next. He closed the notebook, smiled through his exhaustion, and whispered to himself, This is not the end of part 1. This is just the first victory. The millionaire story hasn't even started yet. Spring arrived, and with it, new energy. The snow melted, flowers bloomed, and X felt as if the world itself was giving him a second chance. With his apartment as a base, he began thinking more strategically. He listed every skill he had: cleaning, shoveling, carrying heavy loads, fixing small things, and asked himself which of these could grow into a business. The answer wasn't clear yet, but he knew one thing. He couldn't go back to drifting. He needed to push forward. At the library, he studied business plans, marketing basics, and personal development. He even practiced introducing himself in the mirror. Hello, my name is X. I run a local service business. How can I help you today? Each time he said it, his voice grew steadier, more confident. He didn't have a real business yet, but he could feel it coming. One evening, on his way back to his apartment, X spotted a familiar figure sitting near a fire barrel in the alley. Marcus, the older homeless man who once told him not to give up. Marcus, X called. The old man looked up, surprised. Kid? Damn, I thought the streets had swallowed you whole. X sat beside him and shared his story, how he had started odd jobs, shoveled snow, saved money, and now had a place of his own. Marcus listened silently, nodding. Finally, he said, You did it, kid. You fought. Most of us, we don't. You're different. X felt a lump in his throat. Come with me, Marcus. I have space. I can't offer much, but at least it's better than this. Marcus shook his head. My fight's over, kid. But yours? Yours is just beginning. Go. Build your life. Make it count for both of us. X left with tears in his eyes. That night, he wrote in his notebook, I will succeed. Not just for me, but for everyone who gave up before they could see their dream. With stability came temptation. Some of the people he once knew on the street started asking him for money. At first, he gave small amounts, but soon he realized many weren't using it for food or survival. They were using it for alcohol and drugs. One man even accused him. You think you're better than us now, just because you got a room and a few bucks? X felt torn. He wanted to help, but he also knew he couldn't let others drag him back down. After much struggle, he made a decision. I will help people, but not by giving handouts. I'll help by showing what's possible, by creating something bigger, something that can employ others. It was a painful choice, but it gave him clarity. His path was forward, not backward. One night, lying on his thin mattress, X stared at the ceiling. His body was exhausted from another day of work, but his mind was racing. He realized he had gone from being homeless and hopeless to someone who now had savings, stability, and a vision. But he also knew this was still the bottom rung of the ladder. I survived homelessness.
Now it's time to build wealth. He felt a fire inside him unlike anything he had ever felt before. Not just hunger for food, but hunger for success, for freedom, for legacy. That fire would carry him into the next chapter of his life. The next morning, X received a call on his prepaid phone. It was from a local shop owner who had seen his flyer. "I need someone reliable, not just for one job, for regular work. If you do well, I'll recommend you to others. Are you interested?" X's heart pounded. This was more than a small gig. This was an opportunity to prove himself on a bigger stage. He took a deep breath and answered, "Yes, I'll be there." As he hung up, he looked at his notebook. On the last page, he wrote in bold letters, "Tomorrow, the climb begins."